Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, Flight at the Museum Special, where I talk about the planes in the book. You already know what this is about, let's go, starting with the Markgraf Streiter, Markgraf's first scout with a wonky armament. Markgraf's first scout, seeing service in the Sopwith Euler War, the Streiter was unusual in the number of gun mounts used to solve the propeller interference problem. The most common was a light machine gun on an external swivel that allowed it to fire through the propeller or past it, letting the pilot choose between shooting their propeller off and almost certainly missing. The reliability of these gun arrangements left something to be desired, but the later variants with up to 4 guns are clear precursors to the Attentäter's design, with a weight of fire exceeding any contemporaries, and most modern planes. The fire sale of Sopwith assets in the years after the war has ensured the only place you are unlikely to see a Streiter is the Sopwith Islands themselves. They are popular with poor or remote communities who don't need anything better, with many disarmed for use as farm utility planes. At 11 Thaler and 0 upkeep cost, the Markgraf Streiter is probably the cheapest and the most affordable single-gun rotary scout in Flying Circus. This obviously comes with a gigantic cost elsewhere, like the lack of synchronization gear, so you might just shoot yourself down. Compared to the Rafenau 7K, which can do just the same, it's way slower, and while its handling appears to be better, the 7K has both rotary and wing warping bonus, so the Markgraf Streiter lost in that aspect too. It's really only better in being cheaper, slightly more durable, and let you feel like being a gangster by shooting the gun sideways and then missing every single shot you have fired, but at least you can't shoot yourself down this way. And yes, this plane is real, called the Bristol Scout, one of Britain's first armed scout, before British could develop their own gun synchronizer, so they had to be creative, which is why the gun can turn outward to put its bullet stream far away from its propellers. The plane proceeded to receive multiple changes and upgrades as the war went on, like adding an additional gun which probably just shot the plane down faster, and an installation of an incredibly awkward synchronizer so it can't shoot itself down, but by that point of the war, the plane was quite obsolete already. So anyway, we gonna talk about its variants. The civilian variant just removes the gun and switch out the engine with a liquid-cooled Meyer Windhund engine which has less power but more reliability, slowing the plane down and upping its safety. Reikchander variant just switches the gun to the other side. Akimbo add an extra gun on the other side instead. You might need to learn how to fly a plane with your feet. And lastly, there's the first Fusilier, which adds an additional pair of inaccessible wing LMG, giving this plane a truly ridiculous amount of firepower at a slight cost to its mobility and immense cost to its price. Totally worth it. The Markgraf Streiter is a really cheap armed rotary scout with a unique gimmick that's kinda useless, honestly. Just focus on the cheap part. But eventually, this plane soon led to the development of something way more lethal. Next up, there's the Micher IGB-78, or as I would call it, the Flying Shoe. The MiG-78 series holds the distinction of the first air-to-air kill. In early 1579, an A-78 flown by Hauptfrau L. Goldschmidt and Feldwebel A. Zwingli of the Lohner Principality of Berchta, shot down a Gotha Thaler Drachen with rifle fire. The subsequent UWF order was so large that MiG had to license the design to Ritter to keep up with demand, spurring Johann Farman's quest for the perfect pusher scout. Even well into the 1580s, the armed B-78 could surprise enemy pilots by ditching its bombs and turning hard to come around behind them. As a bomber it is unimpressive, with most aircraft not fitted with a bomb sight, but the sturdy construction can cope with a little bit of ground fire if the pilot is brave enough for low-level attack. After the UWF fell, most remaining B-78s were left to rot on their airfields, too slow and vulnerable for modern warfare. This ubiquity made it a staple of first-generation circuses operating in Lohner, and it is still deeply associated with the region. These days, retiring or dead pilots have spread gently used B-78 across the continent. This thing is painfully slow, and has barely any power to move, but at the very least, it can eat a lot of incoming fire, and with its incredibly low stall speed, it can really afford to spend speed in dogfight to turn like a maniac and shoot its pursuer with its single LMG. While not having any bomb sight, like its history said, the Micher IGB-78 can afford to go low due to its toughness and just drop its payload on someone, and if you do crash the plane, the pilot has roll bar to keep them somewhat safe. The same couldn't be said for the gunner though. One problem though, it's kinda expensive, due to the sheer amount of steel used in its construction, and there are a lot more effective planes within this price range. Actually, 2 problems: it's unstable as hell too, but at least you can see the things you are about to crash into clearly. As for its variant, there's the Ritter Mina, Ritter licensed version with aluminium spar, making the plane even more expensive while having marginally better stat in handling, also more fragile. The A78 variant has no gun, but a small external camera instead to take picture of locations. I recommend bringing a rifle. Finally there's the B78/82, which has an unsort MR engine, 8 massive bomb, and a quality 4 bomb sight, allowing you to drop more bomb at a safer height. The Mitcher IGB78 looks like a shoe, has a bunch of bomb, and tough enough to take some hits. I really won't suggest you to fly this thing unless you really have no option, like at all. Moving on, there's the Muller Experimental 3, a really cheap plane. Designed by Hermann Müller and produced by Euler Waffenfabrik in Schaffurt-an-der-Elba, the M.E.3 was the country's first practical heavier-than-air aircraft. After its demonstration to the crowned heads of the Republic in 1570, it was put into mass production, with each Zeppelin battalion receiving 2 scouts before the year was over. Though soon obsolete, they could be produced by just about any machine shop without interrupting the output of more advanced machines. Their finest hour came in the Sopwith Euler War when Muller himself flew a modified M.E.3 to bomb the town of Sandom in Sopwith, causing little damage but widespread panic. While some stayed in frontline service far beyond their time, easy prey for Markgraf Streiter scouts, most were divested to messenger work or just purchased privately. Most towns in the Euler Valley will have an M.E.3 or 2 somewhere, although they might not be willing to part with them just because some jumped-up kids splash the cash around. Based on the Blériot 11, the first heavier-than-air aircraft to fly across the English Channel, the Muller Experimental 3 is by far the cheapest plane in flying circus, even more so than the Theller-Drachen. Yet somehow, the Muller Experimental 3 is actually better than the Theller-Drachen in a lot of aspect, like more power, once you drop the bomb, more handling with rotary and wing warping bonus, more fuel range, and of course, the fact that it has a weapon at all with one singular massive bomb. However, the Theller-Drachen is a 2-seater, and the Muller Experimental 3 isn't. Still, for a witch with technophobe, this could be a very economical way to use that move, if you could actually buy the plane off someone who clearly knows you are going to crash it in like 5 seconds. As for its variants, there's the civilian variant with Schalzlux 3 engine and no bomb. Obviously, this thing is so absurdly light, a gentle wind will lift it up, and even though it has less speed, it can boost and climb like crazy. Also, the cheapest variant of a plane in flying circus. There's also the armed variant, with a second seat, and a wing-mounted flex machine gun for the gunner. The plane is now slightly slower, could barely boost or climb, but hey, you have a gun. If your wallet has a hole in it, you could consider the Muller Experimental 3 if you want to fly, just try not to do anything else with it. Lastly, there's the SFW Flitzer, a speedy unarmed scout. Sigrist Flugzeugwerke were the preeminent aircraft builders in pre-war Sopwith, making a variety of sports aircraft and light transports. Upon the onset of the Sopwith-Euler War, they proposed their fastest sports aircraft, the Flitzer, as a scout and reconnaissance aircraft for the government. The Flitzer was among the fastest aircraft in the world at the start of the war, but it was entirely unarmed, the pilot being issued a rifle or shotgun to use from the cockpit. It is a testimony to the design that the machine remained useful even against early armed aircraft, as its impressive speed and agility allowed Sopwith pilots to retain dominant positions long enough to land hits. Despite its excellent characteristics, the Flitzer proved less suited to weapon mounts than the Streiter for lack of space in the cockpit and nose. Production ended in 1582 and SFW was folded into Markgraf. The clean lines of the Flitzer mean that they still find use in aerobatic circuses, where the lack of armament isn't an issue. Though the Flitzer might be slow by modern standard, it has a ton of power to climb and boost just about anywhere, and it can turn really well with its handling and rotary engine. The problem, however, comes from the fact that if you try to even touch any bits of the plane, it will immediately suffer and become terrible. It was already optimized at its weight, adding anything additional will immediately drag it down, so I recommend you to just shoot your opponent down with a rifle or magic rather than trying to put a machine gun in it, not that it stopped people from trying. As for its variant, there's the Fliffogerot variant with manually adjustable prop, meaning, with this, you can adjust your prop at the hangar to get more speed or climb rate out of your plane without needing to purchasing new propeller for it. It's just convenient. And then there's the armed variant, which, well, just get the Zek or the Streiter. As a conclusion, the SFW Flitzer is just made for pure speed and mobility, not for firepower, something you should consider when purchasing it. And that's all on these 4 airplanes, from the left-armed Markgraf Streiter that could get increasingly heavily armed, the shoe-shaped Mitcher IGB-78 that can take a surprising amount of ground fire before dropping its payload, the dirt-cheap Muller Experimental 3 that's just really cheap, and the speedy SFW Flitzer that has more than just speed. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.